Hey, what's up everybody? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video I'm actually going to talk about a couple IEMs that are pretty unique in their own way, and these are both from the company called Moondrop. The first is the Moondrop Meteor, which has a retail price of $550 and it features a single DD, 2 BAs, and 4 planars. Then we have the Moondrop Illustrious, which has a retail price of $900 and has a single DD configuration. So both of these were sent over from ShenzhenAudio.com, so huge thanks to them. They don't have any expectations on what I say about it. I don't do any affiliate or marketing links with them, and there's no monetary exchange for this either. So I'm just going to have standard website links to purchase either of these if after watching this you decide one of these is the right one for you. There's also another one they sent over that I'll be discussing later as well, so I have a link in the description for that. So huge thanks to them. Again, won't affect what I say about it, but I just want to disclose that. So before we get any further, because you know the price, that's obviously going to be an obstacle for some people, but I also want to cover something very quickly. Both of these are fairly base light. You could say the Moondrop Meteor is base neutral and the Illustrious is base light. So if you're looking for a base heavy IEM, regardless of spec and seeing the chunker size that the Meteor is, don't expect pounding bass. So if that was your other piece of criteria you were looking for, I just wanted to disclose that early. So once we move past that, let's start with the Moondrop Meteor, which like I said, has a retail price of $550. The packaging is huge, and at least you feel like you're getting an expensive IEM because the unboxing experience is quite nice. So we're going to remove this lid here. I'm going to show you how it's presented. You can use your imagination. Obviously the IEMs were on top, and then you have quite a few accessories. So you have the case, several different types of tips, and then the accessories pouch, which I've kind of already emptied because it's basically just the cable. So I'm just going to open up this case real quick. I actually like this case more than the more expensive Illustrious, just because one, it's black, and frankly the zipper works better. It has a soft padding on the inside, and then the 3.5 millimeter termination, if I can get it out. And I'll show you how to swap that because it's pretty straightforward. As far as the tips go on the Meteor, you get a few different sets and obviously different sizes. And I'll take this time to again bring up the fact that tips are so important for IEMs, because if you don't have a good seal, they sound like crap. So just because you feel like you're always a medium tip person, sometimes the bore size, or like the nozzle size, of the IEM can actually change how it fits, even the shape of the IEM. So experiment with tips just to make sure you're getting the sound profile you're expecting, especially in the bass department. It will shift everything else, but naturally you get 3 different sizes of silicone tips. The other box, which we're going to open here, it comes with the UCs, like the Ultra Clears, which are soft ears tips, because Moondrop and soft ears are related to each other. Again, 3 different sizes here. These have a similar diameter and shape to them, but the UCs are a little bit stickier. So if you want like a more snug and stable fitting, this might be a better tip to go with. Looking at the Moondrop Illustrious packaging, you get a massive case. And this is partly why I couldn't zoom in as much on the top camera, because this thing is just huge. And we're going to take this piece off. There's a little pull tab, and it's presented quite differently, but as you can see, it's designed to give you a more, or elicit a more premium unboxing experience. So you get this case, which is kind of familiar looking to other Moondrop cases. This actually just unzipped quite nice, and again you have a swappable tip just like you get with the Meteor. But we're going to put this guy away real quick. I'm going to remove this because I want to show you the accessories that are included with this guy, because unlike the Meteor, you get 4 different types of tips with the Illustrious. As you can see, there's a lot of paper unboxing here, and look, we're finally getting to the actual tip accessories box. And look, another case. How absurd is this? So we finally got that out, and you can see a lot of different tips inside. So you can see that 2 are missing, because that's the one that I'm using. You get the spring fit tips, which have 3 different sizes, of course. You get the silicone tips, which are the most common ones. Then you have the Comply foam, and then the Ultra Clears from, again, soft ears. I would personally, these aren't bad, but I like the soft ears Ultra Clears and then the traditional silicone tips. But would definitely experiment with this because you'll have different fit preferences. The memory foam typically gives you better isolation and usually a little bit more bass response, but I get a skin reaction personally to memory foam, so I don't like using those for myself. As far as the cables go, I'm a little bit let down by the Illustrious. This whole part of the cable I love. It's gorgeous, it's very clean and light, there's no microphonics issues. This collar is like whatever, it's there, but it doesn't really do anything. I can just kind of pull this cable straight and the collar falls down on its own. My issue is I don't like all the kinks in a cable, and if I'm spending $900 on an IEM, I want this to be perfect. I want it to look and feel like an expensive IEM, and frankly I've had $100 IEMs with significantly better cables than this, so To me, if you're getting the Illustrious, if you like all the other stuff that I have and will be talking about, I would just swap the cable, and I think you're going to have a better, more premium experience overall. Now, you don't have the same issue with the cable on the Moondrop Meteor, which I actually think is a gorgeous cable. Again, you have the small termination, even though it's swappable, which is nice. The color, the weight, the thickness, it's just the right balance because you don't want too heavy of a cable on an IEM. It doesn't have the same kink issues as the much more expensive Illustrious. And again, I think the cable color really matches the aesthetic of the Meteor as well. So overall, I like the cable on the Meteor more. I don't really see the need to ever change it unless you're going for a color, but that's a pretty nice included wire. So when I meant swappable terminations and you can switch this plug here, all that means is I can change from the 4.4 to the 3.5. Now I'm using the 4.4 because my desktop amplifier setup has a 1/4 inch or 6.3 out, 4.4 balanced and XLR. So I'm gonna have to use the 1/4 inch adapter anyway. So this just makes it nicer because it's a single smaller plug that goes from my portable setup to my home use. So it is nice that you have different terminations, and to switch it, all you have to do is unscrew this little piece here, that little locking collar, and you basically just pull it out. It's super easy to switch. There's two ways to identify how to line it up. There's a little black arrow on this, and the plug has the same. And if you look inside, you can see like there's a little bit of a notch, if you will. So all you have to do is line that up, press that in, and then lock this. I like this instead of just relying purely on tension, because if you do that, sometimes they come out. This is a really nice implementation. It's the exact same approach on the Illustrious as well. As far as ergonomics and shapes go, they really couldn't be any more different from each other, to be honest, because you have a massive shell on the Meteor, and you can see this tiny shell on the more expensive Illustrious. Part of it is, of course, the driver configuration. The DD on the Meteor is a 13mm dynamic, so the thing is absolutely massive. And you have these actual meteorite inlay, which is usually found in more luxury items like watches. So it's a unique design, and the thing I want to point out is for the part that actually touches your ear, it's not much bigger, it's just incredibly deep. So when you wear this, because the hooks are actually placed in a pretty good spot, at least for me with the Meteor, it doesn't really feel any bigger in ear than much smaller IEMs, because this shape and overall height actually still fits my ear really well. Now, don't get me wrong, the Illustrious is so tiny that I would rather just be wearing the Illustrious, but I just want to paint that picture. As far as nozzle shape goes, the Moondrop Meteor, I expect it to be worse, and it's not terrible, partly because it doesn't have a lip on it. So I'm getting right about 6.5 millimeters of nozzle width, and it's round. There's no like oval shape to it, so even if I measure here, that's within the margin of error. So basically 6.5 millimeter nozzle. There's no lip here, so you don't feel any part getting bigger either. And on the smaller Moondrop Illustrious, we're going to show you how this looks. Let's just get that angle. 5.4 millimeters, and again, it's obviously round, so 5.5 millimeters, I should say. So it's a little bit smaller. Both of these don't have a lip, which sometimes I don't like, because depending on what tips you have, they can more easily fall off of the actual IEM itself. That lip usually helps keep the tip secure. I've only had one time where when I was handling the Illustrious, I actually got the tip to kind of slide off, but that was doing things that I don't normally use just for wearing. It was kind of just handling it for some tests and measurements and stuff like that. So for the most part, it's surprisingly secure. Both of these are very comfortable in ear. This is a metal body, and it just feels super premium. It's also a fingerprint magnet, so you're going to be cleaning it like crazy, and at least if you care to. And on the Meteor, it hides it better because it has this acrylic design. So the gloss black does show print, but only under a bright reflective light. And even though it's looking kind of like a one-piece shell, the way it's molded, you can see like a clear line right here for where the two pieces come together. Otherwise, the meteorite part is molded perfectly underneath that clear acrylic. It looks really nice, and the polish on it's really good too. As far as how the IEMs fit in my ear, you can see that on the Meteor, it sticks out quite a bit. It feels very secure though. I do want to keep pointing that out. As large as it is, it actually feels very stable in my ear, and frankly, it's very comfortable. The only reason why this would ever be an issue is if I'm wearing a beanie or if I'm laying down on a pillow or something and I'm laying on my side. This is going to stick out a little bit too much. Whereas if you look at the Illustrious, it's very much a different look and feel. It fits pretty much inside my ear. It does feel slightly looser, but it's a byproduct of something else I'm going to get into in a moment here. Overall, the ergonomics wise, if I'm just sitting perfectly straight, the Meteor feels more stable in my ear, but there's no denying that this is still very comfortable to wear. I think the Illustrious's distribution of weight kind of helps for long-term wearing more. You just have to find the right tip so it feels stable. The Moondrop Meteor is vented, so there's a tiny little vent you could see just behind the termination here. So there is a little bit of a vent to relieve some pressure, but it definitely has a more traditional occlusion effect, so there's some strong isolation when you're wearing these. Doesn't have the same plunger effect that I get with like the Kiwi Ears Orchestra Light, but I did want to point that out. Now, the special thing about the Illustrious is the ventilation. This is going to play into the sound quality a lot, but this thing is so open. If you can see that slat, this vertical line right here, right next to the actual nozzle itself, that is a whole vent, and I don't know if you can see through that, but it is a very open sounding IEM, and you have this little vent back here. This to me is the biggest selling point of the Illustrious because it doesn't have that same plunger effect that a lot of people are sensitive to. So I want to point out and highlight this. This is the most open sounding IEM that I've ever tried. So let's start with sound quality, starting with the Moondrop Illustrious, because that ventilation is kind of what makes it really special to me. And if I were to be reviewing this IEM separately, I had all these cool like one-liner titles I wanted to use. One of them is like, you know, the IEM for people who don't like IEMs, the IEM for gamers with kids, the IEM version of an HD 650, smooth operator, you name it. And I think you can kind of get an idea where this is going. If we look at the frequency response, this is going to look rather boring and it's going to be very bass light. Even if you look at diffuse field, it's bass light. And it does read that to an extent when you listen to it, but I get a rather warm sound profile when I listen to it. The mids are incredibly smooth and there's not a lot of treble extension or air either. There's enough spaciousness to it where I don't feel like I'm in a closet, but it's definitely not your hyper analytical sounding IEM. This is very much a smooth sounding IEM, but the big thing I want to start with is because this has almost no occlusion when you wear it, it feels almost like an open back-ish, and that's huge for me. My issue with IEMs is because I have kids and a dog and you know, I have an active lifestyle. If I'm ever wearing these at home and I'm consuming content, gaming, watching movies, listening to music, etc., I often go with an open back headphone. With IEMs, I'm completely oblivious to everything that's happening around me, and that's much less so the case with the Illustrious. So that's a huge point of consideration for me for an IEM like this. When it comes to sound quality exclusively though, this is where it gets a little bit into a gray area because it is not doing anything extremely technical or analytical or even mind-blowing. It sounds very smooth, and this is more if you want like a smooth vocal mid-range performing IEM. It doesn't even have a super sharp attack and decay. Everything's kind of blended in to the main fundamental tone. It doesn't have like a knife edge start and stop that you typically get with a lot of hybrids and tribirds out there. So this is a high-end single DD and it sounds like it. The issue is the price. Not everyone's going to agree with paying $900 and trade off some resolution and bite and attack that you get with even $300 to $500 IEMs. The Moondrop Meteor has a sharper resolution than the more expensive Illustrious. The reason why you get the Illustrious to me is how smooth and natural things sound. It really is the closest experience I've had to an HD 650 in an IEM. That includes the bass, sub-bass roll-off, that includes the smooth mid-range, and that also includes the not incredibly wide soundstage. However, it doesn't feel as like claustrophobic as some other IEMs that are fully sealed in my ear. I think the fact that it's an open, very ventilated IEM helps kind of expand the stage a little bit, but it's definitely a darker, wider sound. Frankly, this is just the IEM that you listen to if you don't want like hypercritical listening. You just want a good daily, but you want comfort and you like the idea of having something open. That is really where you're considered paying the price for it. Do not get this if you're a huge bass head, even if you EQ this up. It is not known for sub bass. It's more for like a good mid-warm kind of bass delivery. And if you're okay with all that, it's going to be great for it. And then you have the Moondrop Meteor, which I thought was going to be a bass cannon when I saw these giant shells, all the ports, and the 13mm driver. I mean, how could that not be a recipe for a lot of bass? And they have a lot of restraint here. These two are kind of like the opposite direction of what I typically expect Moondrop to be, where I usually get either sharper treble and some nice pounding bass, like a good V shape. This bass is very tight and controlled. If anything, it's a tad bit constrained. So even if you EQ the bass up with the Meteor, it does have noticeably more bass than the Illustrious, but it doesn't hit quite as hard or as deep as other IEMs at and below this price range. one of them being the High Senior Mega 5 EST, or even the Moondrop Dusk, the newest one that Krin came out with in 2024. That to me is still the best bass impact and slam that I've had for a sub $500 IEM. I think that dynamic driver, the dual dynamic driver configuration, sounds fantastic. So if you're a bass head, that's great. What's really interesting about the Meteor is how smooth the treble is. It's not hyper analytical. If you have something like the Zen's Manger T Pro, which has been a pretty popular IEM, that sounds noticeably brighter and sharper. Even the Thigh Audio Hype 4, the Audio Hype 4, sounds a little bit sharper and more analytical sounding than this. This is a smooth delivery, and it's kind of like a more closed version of the Illustrious in the sense of it's going for smoothness more than like pounding bass and crazy sharp treble. I don't mind it, but it definitely doesn't have the same air or sparkliness that I typically find IEMs in this price range. Now, to be clear, I generally prefer a smoother delivery. I don't like a super metallic timbre. I don't like a lot of glisten and sparkle in the treble. It can get a little bit too much, especially depending on the content you consume. So this is a less fatiguing listen. I think the biggest issue with this guy is the bass shelf overhead. You know, if you like to add more bass, it just doesn't quite deliver as much as some other IEMs do. I think it's held back a little bit there. The Meteor also doesn't have the most mid bass, so it doesn't have like a really warm presentation to it, partly because the, bass shelf it does have, even though it's not strong, it's shifted towards the lower frequencies a bit, and then the vocal region is pushed forward just slightly above neutral for me, so it comes across as really clean and resolving, but the vocals kind of stand up to the mix really well. So if you're chasing guitars or you want voices to be just as present, if not just like half a step forward above the rest of the backtrack, I think the Meteor does a good job of focusing on those areas. When it comes to voicing on the Moondrop Illustrious, it's slightly different. So there's more warmth because there's less focus on the sub bass, so everything has just a little bit more body to it. And while because it's neutral in the treble and the sub bass, vocals are still present and, kind of align with the rest of the mix, but they are incredibly smooth. There's nothing that stands out as having like a little extra bite or forwardness. It's all very well blended and natural, and honestly, I do like the sound signature of the Illustrious a lot. It's not as sharp or clinical sounding, which, kind of skirts the line about value proposition at this price range. But for what I do hear, things do sound very natural and smooth. And frankly, because of that, as long as I'm not chasing like a lot of rap and, EDM or trap music, if you want like a lot of sub bass, this is just a stellar performer for a huge variety of other genres because of it. So I grabbed this IEM. This is the IO Audio Volare, which was sent to me by Shenzhen Audio as well. And it's a fantastic IEM, but it's about $50 more than the Moondrop Meteor. It has a lot of the stuff I like about the Meteor, but more bass extension. So if you're chasing a little bit looser bass and you like the idea of a resolving but somewhat smoother treble, I think this IEM is something worth considering. It handles EQ better on the bass side as well. So this is still a gorgeous IEM. If anything, it's a little bit more compact, but I really love the shell. This part kind of, it's a traditional like metallic looking spray paint, if you will, but they pulled off the single unibody design quite well, and you can see the bass port here. So this is a fun IEM. I've enjoyed it. I think the balance that the Meteor brings, it's a leaner profile, a more bass neutral profile, pretty good technical performance as well. It still sounds fairly clear and resolving, but it's not like a knife edge transient response either. It's just a little bit sharper than the Illustrious with a more traditional sound profile that I think a lot of IEM heads are chasing. So when it comes to gaming performance, I think I might have a somewhat unique take, because the more I keep seeing some of the top recommended IEMs for gaming, the more I realize I might be more treble sensitive than some other people out there, frankly, because you don't need an insane amount of treble to get good detail. And I hope that over time more people realize that, because the more you stab your ears with treble, the more hearing damage you're going to have down the road. There needs to be somewhat of a balance here. Obviously, overall amplitude and volume are going to be the big deciding factor on how much damage you ever do to your hearing, but don't feel like you need an insane amount of treble to cheat yourself into thinking you're getting more detail. That's not how it all works. And I think this is where Moondrop did a really good job here, because they balance surprisingly good resolution and clarity without giving you an insane amount of treble. This is where the whole technical performance thing comes from. And you don't need a lot of bass for gaming unless you're chasing the immersive side and you want to get sucked into the environment more, like explosions happening, rumbling effects, things like that. Then yeah, maybe the Volare or the High Senior Mega 5 EST, those are going to deliver more bass. Even the Softears Volume S has a wonderful bass delivery as well if you're chasing that. That's a really fun IEM. These guys are more neutral, and on the competitive side of FPS, I prefer IEMs like this. Now, the Illustrious, this is a lot of money to pay for an IEM for gaming, and when you A/B this at a lower volume directly against something like the Hype 4 or the Manger T Pro, those are going to sound more analytical and sharp and detailed and all that stuff. However, for long gaming sessions, if I'm turning it up a little bit and I'm really getting locked into the game, I much prefer the sound profile of the Illustrious because I want smoothness and I want to focus on the mid-range more because a lot of the audio cues I care about are between 100 and 200 hertz for like the fundamental tone of a footstep impact. And then, you know, the whole 1 to 4 kilohertz area is such a critical area to get right for competitive play. And if you go too much in one particular spot, certain things can be too sharp sounding and it can overpower other areas. So this guy, you know, and I guess this ties into gaming or music listening a little bit as well. The Meteor is a little bit more forward in 1 to 2K, so it's going to push vocals forward a little bit. And signature-wise, this is a nice sound signature for footstep detail as well. I just think that the Illustrious has a really nice natural presentation for imaging where it doesn't feel forced. And again, tying into the whole open ventilation thing earlier, this feels more like I'm gaming with an open back headphone, and to me that's always been my favorite to use for gaming. So to me, I would lean towards the Illustrious. The big issue here is paying $900 purely for a gaming IEM. That's a little crazy. You can get very competitive for significantly less money, but if you look at it in a box and forget price, the performance that you get is awesome, and it's really comfortable and easy to game on for a very long period of time. The only downside I do want to say though is because this IEM is so open, if you have a very loud environment, you don't have that same occlusion effect, which means you hear your environment more. Loud PC fans, a vacuum, HVAC, etc. You're going to hear a little bit of that come through on the IEM, which will increase your noise floor, so maybe you'll hear less subtle details. That's something to consider when you get a very open IEM. If you're going out and about, then you want more noise isolation. If you have a very loud environment, then you want more noise isolation, and that's where something like the Meteor or other IEMs I mentioned would be better suited for that. And that about wraps up the review. So again, huge thanks to ShenZhenAudio.com for sending this. And if I were to kind of summarize this all, I think they're both a tad overpriced for what you get because there are so many other amazing IEMs on the market. I do like what Moondrop's doing. I just think it should have been a little bit less money. Both of these are very smooth. They have good resolution and technical performance, but not like the bleeding edge, hyper resolving type presentation. This is just the stuff you go for if you want something smooth. I like the accessories package. I like the way they both fit and feel in my ear. The Illustrious's openness and lack of occlusion to me is the biggest selling point, but $900 is a bit of an ask purely for that alone. Just, however, even in the whole sea of IEMs I've used and tested, I have enjoyed the Illustrious a lot because it's the closest thing to an open back headphone, which I typically prefer. So some people are going to look for an IEM that gets close to that because they need the form factor of an IEM, but they don't want to trade off what they love about headphones. The Illustrious is one of the best ones you can get in that area. And then when you look at the Meteor is good. There's really nothing wrong with it. It's not your IEM to get if you're adding a lot of bass and you feel like you can just fix that sound profile by boosting it more. It's a fun IEM. It's just a tight mid-range smooth treble, and the vocals are pushed forward just a little bit to stand up to the rest of the mix well. So if you like neutrality, these are both great. They're just not class leading in any particular area. So that kind of summarizes where we're at today. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe so I can see you at the next one. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.